Living room.
Is now a quiet zone. Don't talk, text, or arrive late. Keep your cell phone dark, silent, and out of sight. After one warning, you will be ejected from the
Living room.
without a refund. Problem with a loud
Roommate?
raise an order card and a
Take care of it yourself. It's your house.
thank you for your cooperation.
God bless you all. My name is Reverend Eric Gates from Faith United Church of Christ in Bryan, Texas. It's a joy to have each of you here. We extend a special welcome to those who are single, married, divorced, filthy rich, and dirt poor. We don't care if you can recite the Bible or not. If you don't have everything figured out or your life isn't perfect, you're at the right place. Feel free to doubt and ask questions. It doesn't bother us. If you're in recovery or still addicted, welcome. Don't like organized religion? No worries. We've been there too. Tattoos, piercings, or both? Glad to have you. We offer a special welcome to those who could use a prayer right now or had religion shoved down your throat as a kid. We love imperfection, and we welcome you. On a cold winter day, a man walked into a church wearing a beanie. While keeping the beanie on, he sat down in a pew. The ushers politely asked him to take the beanie off. The man refused. Church members gave him looks of annoyance and irritation. The man could feel the judgmental gazes. The pastor became bothered as well and waited to speak to the man after worship. He told the man that he was welcome to come and worship again. He even invited the man to join the church. But he explained to this man that the congregation had an expectation that men take their hats and beanies off during worship. He said, "I hope you will conform to that practice in the future." "Thank you," the man replied. "And thank you for taking time to talk to me. It is nice of you to invite me to join your congregation. However, I joined this congregation 3 years ago, and I've been coming here regularly ever since. But today is the first time anyone has ever talked to me. So after being unknown for 3 years, by keeping my beanie on, I have gotten to talk to the ushers. I have been noticed by some of my fellow church members in the pew. And now I am finally able to have a conversation with you, even though you've been too busy to talk to me before." Wow. This story makes a painful point. It reminds the church how important it is to extend hospitality. And it reminds us how difficult it can be to be a welcoming community, especially to those who are different from us, those we consider outsiders. Although with online worship, the ability for people interested in being a part of church is much less intimidating and anxiety-inducing because they aren't being judged by how they look and all of the other reasons it's difficult to step through the doors of a church building. Anyway, I digress. The church itself lives at a certain boundary, the boundary between those who are like us and those who are unlike us, the boundary between life on the inside and encounters with those on the outside. It can be an uncomfortable place to live. We'd rather not be pushed and stretched. We'd rather not have to deal with those unlike us. We'd prefer not to be bothered by those who want to worship in a contemporary style, or those who speak a language other than English. It's easier not to become an open and affirming church which means the church advertises its openness and acceptance towards the lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer people who are Christians or those who are in the community looking for a safe place that they can call a church home. No, we'd like to keep the boundaries of the church cozy and neat and clean. We'd like to fill it with people who look like us, think like us, talk like us, and share our lifestyles. But then we wouldn't be the church, would we? Because the church has always found itself called to live at the boundary, where it's not so clear who is acceptable to God and who is not. That's where Jesus found himself one day. Jesus was weary. He had been involved in a flurry of activity in recent days. He just wanted to rest. But people kept coming to him. A crowd came seeking healing when he was alone in the wilderness. Jesus healed them, and he fed them. His disciples were threatened in a late-night storm at sea, and he had to come to their rescue. Each time, he had only wanted to be alone to pray. Jesus was weary. And then the Pharisees get in the act when they hear a rumor that Jesus and his disciples didn't follow their interpretation of God's law about washing their hands before eating bread. They started a debate with Jesus. He made his point that God is more concerned about compassion than about being ritually clean. He made his point, but he made some enemies too. And Jesus was weary. In needing to rest and seeking renewal, Jesus went off into a remote area to be alone, to pray and reflect on his mission. Jesus goes toward the boundary. He heads off to the edge of Palestine, to the area of Tyre and Sidon, in the north, along the Mediterranean Sea. And there, at the boundary, an outsider, a Canaanite woman, confronts him. She's got a problem. She has a daughter possessed by a demon. Serious stuff. And she's heard about the compassion and healing power of Jesus. And she shouts at him, pleading for help. "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me." Now, in Jesus' eyes, this woman has another problem. He knows about the wideness of God's mercy. He knows that the compassion of God has no boundaries. He has embodied that compassion already when he healed a Roman soldier's servant. Jesus knows about the compassion of God and the wideness of God's mercy, but he also knows his own mission. And that mission is to gather the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The woman doesn't fit the bill. She's a Canaanite, one of the ancient enemies of Israel. And she's a woman. And she's got a daughter with a frightening illness. Time is short. His work is urgent, and Jesus just doesn't have time for this outsider. He brushes her off, but she persists. And finally, because of her great faith, Jesus grants her request. At the boundary, Jesus gives a hint that the mission to the lost ones of Israel will be expanded to the ends of the earth. Jesus is moved by the woman's great faith. Last week, we saw the video about the disciples threatened at sea, the storm tossing their little boat about. Jesus came walking on the water to rescue them. Peter tried walking on the water too, and he started to sink and had to be rescued by Jesus. Do you remember what Jesus accused Peter of after he had rescued him? Little faith. Peter had little faith. Now that's interesting, isn't it? One of Jesus' closest followers, an insider, often wavered in his faith. And in contrast, at the boundary, Jesus encounters a Gentile woman, an outsider, with great faith What makes her faith great? The woman is persistent. When she knows who she's dealing with and knows the power and compassion of Jesus, she doesn't let up until she receives mercy for her daughter. She is willing to risk humiliation because she knows Jesus can help her. And though she is an outsider, the woman is willing to acknowledge the power of Jesus. Lord, she calls him, and Son of David. She knows he is powerful in Israel, and she knows his power over all people and all things. She knows that Jesus can do what she asks, even though she's on the outside looking in. I remember when I was the pastor of a downtown Austin congregation. The church is located in an area that used to be a neighborhood where people no longer live. It's now filled with government buildings, and the remaining homes are now lawyers' offices. But there are still many people who live in that area, but they live on the streets. Some are single parents living in poverty, struggling to provide for their children. And some are individuals who have just had a bad string of outcomes in their lives based upon decisions they've made or haven't made. Many of them were unchurched or had become disillusioned with the church. The needs were great, and I thought the church needed to step up to try and make a difference in their lives. Initially, that had to begin with me. After all, I was the pastor of the church, and I felt it was my duty and obligation to support these persons by just sitting with them, giving them an hour of time to listen to their stories and struggles. I would go into the neighborhood to meet people where they were, to listen to their stories where they were, to tell them that they were not forgotten and that God loves them, and to try to get them connected with the church by inviting them to come and meet me in my office or join the Sunday morning worship service to feel more support. One of the people I met was a man I'll call Michael. Michael was desperate. Usually, he was not on his medications. He struggled with mental health issues and shared with me what those were exactly. Michael had a history of drinking and depression. The depression left him with little physical or emotional energy to deal with doing the necessary things to get help for himself. He just couldn't do it. For instance, just getting a Texas ID card was near impossible for Michael. Michael also had a history with the church. He was one of those disillusioned people. He had experienced some rejection from neighboring churches downtown because of how he smelled, how he looked, how he dressed, and how he talked. His bizarre behavior usually was caused by an inconsistent medication regimen, which churchgoers didn't know. Regardless, he still wanted to believe. After I'd visited a number of times, Michael asked me if he could attend church on a Sunday morning. I was thrilled. I was so excited. But even my enthusiasm was quickly tempered when Michael said this: "Yeah, we'll see how excited you are when your church members judge me. These clothes are all I have, and I won't smell any better." I will never forget the day Michael joined the church, and I will never forget the judgmental comments I heard from some of the longtime church members about how Michael smelled, behaved, and looked. I was shocked, but that's why I'm not shocked anymore about why so many people become disillusioned with church. Unlike the church members who couldn't move past judging a book by its cover, I discovered a sincere and great faith in a place where I didn't expect to find it. Like Jesus when he encountered the Canaanite woman, I encountered faith in an outsider, a person I met at the boundary like Jesus in our story. That's where the church of today is called to be, at the boundary, meeting people who seem unlikely candidates to live a life of faith and discipleship. Those folks are there at the boundary, like Michael, like the Canaanite woman. They are there. Our mission is to the lost sheep, the ones who have turned away from the church, and also, at the command of the risen Lord, to all people of all nations. Our mission is to be there at the boundary, where people are different in some ways, but just like us in their need to know Jesus. It's a difficult place to be at the boundary, but it's a good place to be too. Why? Because there are some great people of faith there. And oh yes, Jesus is there too. As we finish the message today, recommit yourself to love others as Jesus loved. Remember to put God in the center of your life, because God will do for you what you cannot do for yourself. Now, each of you get into motion this week and offer yourself and your neighbor the invitation of Christ's hope and love. Amen.